You better have really high mental fortitude and mental stamina to survive the psychological torment of owning and running your own company. And you better have thick skin, and your ego might get bruised here or there. So you got to be able to endure those kinds of things. It's definitely not easy if you want to turn it into a multi-million-dollar business with employees. There's a lot you have to do.
Welcome to And Then I Did This. Prepare to be inspired as we celebrate the unique journeys of individuals who've had the courage to break free and live life on their own terms. Their lives prove that you truly can be free to live your best and most authentic life. Let's get to it. Welcome to the show. I have two special guests with me today. They are the co-founders of Vuja Dé Digital. Vuja Dé Digital is a true performance marketing agency. They're a multi-award-winning team of media experts and industry veterans, and they're obsessed with finding a better way to do what they do every day. They're not only experts at everything related to media strategy and planning and buying, but they're business strategists. They take on their clients' objectives like their own objectives because that's how they're paid. That's how they're compensated, is on the performance of their clients and hitting their numbers and meeting their objectives. So, Todd and Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So who would like to start and share a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you got where you are today with your own agency?
So my kind of career journey is interesting. I started out going to school for entrepreneurship and business, and definitely knew that I wanted to be in that world. In school, I worked in finance. It just so happened this was right before financial crash. And as I was graduating, I sort of had a decision to make. In school, I was working on a digital platform, and that got me some exposure to some ad agencies that I had gone and pitched, although I hadn't really done much in the advertising world. But I went to graduate and I had a decision to make between sticking in finance and the job I had been doing that I didn't necessarily love, but was interested in, or I'd gotten some offers from some of the agencies that I'd talked to. And I interviewed with them and I decided that I didn't want to be in finance, and I went down that route. I ended up taking a job, not really knowing exactly what it was I was doing with marketing. So I kind of went in and felt it out. And it just so happened that it fit my personality really well. And I really liked the digital media world. And it was an interesting time in it. And I grew in that really rapidly. And it took me in a lot of interesting ways. I was involved in social media incredibly early, Facebook incredibly early. I was kind of as knowledgeable as you could be in that space because I operated alongside it in my personal endeavors. And that allowed me a lot of interesting opportunities. I went to work for Google, and a company that they had purchased, and built out an emerging media department to be in the early days of Facebook ads and really their enterprise level. And that got me exposure to the early days of programmatic trading desks and all of that. And I just got exposure into these sort of unique parts of the world and early exposure and early experience in it. And that sort of gave me a leg up as I was exploring different avenues. And ultimately, my path took me into a company that Todd was the president of, and he needed someone to help him build out social media, not really knowing what it was. And I knew it well. And so I decided to go to work for that. And we got acquired and got questions around building out media buying houses and departments for larger holding companies, and took a very interesting route to that, decided to take a unique angle towards that, and continued to grow throughout that. And that kind of led us into owning our agency, which I'm sure we'll get into some of the more details later on here.
So cool. So cool. So Todd, your path to getting to that point of meeting Kelly.
Well, if I go way back, what I realized was I was not going to be successful as a sponsored athlete in my early days as I wanted to be. And I figured, well, now I'm going to have to go to school and get a real job. But one thing I understood working with athletes and being an athlete is that marketing, I was basically a billboard. And so I understood marketing. I understood the value of brands trying to get their audience to be influenced by certain people. I didn't know at the time that was what an influencer was. It just meant you put stickers on your surfboard and said, that's what you're supposed to buy. When that didn't work out, I decided I'd better go back to college and get a degree. Went back to college, got a degree in marketing, got my first agency job, started in ad sales before that in some tech companies in the early .com days. So I was more on the publishing and media side and the big .coms in those early days. Transitioned over to the agency side, stayed in one agency until I ran the agency and eventually helped the owner sell it. As Kelly said, that we met in that original agency. Kelly was the guy to come in and start social media for our agency back in 2008, 2009, when that was sort of a new thing. He was much younger and smarter than me in that particular area. So I knew what I didn't know, and I knew I better go find somebody that's a lot smarter than me to do that. It was interesting given our age difference. We're about 15 years apart. We're generationally different. He's a millennial. I'm Gen X. We just came from different walks of life, but also had a lot of similarities. We almost broke up and then realized that through sports and competitiveness, we probably couldn't be a better fit for each other. And then we also realized our strengths and weaknesses. He doesn't like management. He likes to create and ideate. I don't like to create and ideate. I'm better at management and operations. So we sort of made a perfect fit for checking most of the boxes. As he said, we got acquired. We built 2 new agencies in that acquisition, and then decided that to really do it the way we thought it should and could be done, we had to do it ourselves. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs eventually come to that conclusion is if you want, what's the saying? If you want to do something right, you got to do it yourself. Not to say we weren't doing things right before, but we knew there was a specific way we wanted to do things. So we figured out that we were going to have to go raise capital and do that on our own. And in that process, sort of became the name of the company. And that was through our exploration of the agency business is a very, especially on the media side, it feels like a very commoditized, low price service industry. And that never really sat well with us. So our whole sort of ethos and idea behind starting a company was that it had to be different, and what we did had to be different. And it could not be what most people were expecting in their agency relationship and their agency service to be like, because we just didn't want to do that. And so we found out that the obvious opposite of deja vu was Vuja Dé, but we also didn't know that there was a book written about it and it actually had a whole story. And we sort of latched onto that. And more importantly, the domain was available. So we were able to acquire the domain, but our brand promise does mean something. Vuja Dé and the Vuja Dé moment and the Vuja Dé experience does mean something. We're not just trying to come up with a cute name. It is what we live and die by every day.
Kelly, you talk about that a little bit because I see your head nodding. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we talked about, which was if we're going to bother building something, it needs to have a unique angle to it. Needs to have a unique perspective. And one of the things that Todd and I talked about, and one of the things I think we align on and what makes us good partners is we have sort of similar values and similar reasons for wanting to do things. And, we had struggled with the idea that, not everything was always done to what we felt like was altruistically exactly how it should be done for the best interest of the client and agency relationship and full transparency and full knowledge. And you kind of get in certain structures and certain business structures, you get forced into doing things for the good of the business and maybe not the good of what you're doing. And I think Todd and I wanted to believe that if we built something for the right reasons, we built something targeted to the right objectives, that we could find people that wanted that experience. And we understood that that was going to be a premium experience. It wasn't going to be a race to the bottom. That was the exact opposite of what we wanted to build, was having to cut corners and having to not be transparent, having to mask things so that everyone could kind of get theirs. But really saying, look, let's be honest, let's be open, let's operate like anything else in the world where you get what you pay for, and make sure that if we get someone to believe in us in that way, that we deliver upon it. And that will create a better working relationship that we'll be happier with, we'll navigate better. And it was a risk. I mean, it was definitely against the grain with the direction that our industry goes in. You're kind of selling yourself a lot. People have to believe in what you're saying because everyone says the right things and claims the right things or says what it takes to get things done. So it just comes down to, can you make those connections and can you fulfill those promises and build that reputation? And it's been something that we've worked really hard at trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not easy starting a business, and let alone starting an agency in the competitive space that you're in. So what would you say are some of the biggest lessons you guys have had starting an agency, even with the experience that you have? Because you both had a fair amount of experience going into it.
Do you want to go first, Kelly, or you want me to?
I mean, you can go into detail. I think Covering off on something that I just said, well, the thoughts in my mind, I will give credit to, I think, someone in our organization that doesn't always get the credit on it. Todd and I got really lucky that we actually had an additional partner that backed us and gave us the support and gave us the runway and a bit of a safety net to be able to build this out as well. That was very validating and incredibly valuable to us as well. So having that infrastructure and having that support system in a partner that saw what we were doing and was willing to back us and willing to give us that freedom, I think at the time, I didn't realize how valuable it was. It wasn't the easiest to bring in sort of a non-operational partner. There was definitely what felt like a sacrifice in the moment, turned out to be something that was incredibly valuable and worth all of it in our minds and what we got structured for. And again, we got very, very lucky with that. But I didn't think about it as much as the time. It was kind of, we're building this, we're doing that. And it felt like at the time just a little bit of money to get started, but it ended up being a lot more than that. It was a resource and another point of view. And again, just having that backing. So I think that was unique to me that I wasn't expecting right out of the gate.
What about you, Todd?
So mine, like Kelly and I, were very different in terms of certain things. Yeah, I do think that was an unexpected thing. But lessons learned for me, I remember the chairman of the company we were with prior to coming here telling us sort of on our exit, starting and building an ad agency is not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. And I was like, well, yeah, but I've been running them for years. I think the biggest lessons I've learned, and this is just me personally, and I don't know if this is a downside to my ability to lead and run a company or a plus side. It might not be the most capitalistic thing to be like, but what I have learned the most is that my morals and my values have to allow me to govern what I do more so than the idea of capitalism and making money. That was an internal struggle more than anything, but it manifested externally because I had to learn how to be older than everybody else that works in the company and then relate to them and relate to what their needs and wants are and to relate to how the world has changed from COVID and relate to remote work and relate to work-life balance and all the things that nobody cared at all about when I grew up working in the business. No one cared about that. Everybody just said, do your job, put your head down, shut up and make me money. And that's how I grew up working in corporate America. And I had to learn that I couldn't have a company and morally care about it and run it that way. I had to run it differently. And that's been a massive learning, is simply how to relate to people and what's important to them and set money and set ego and set all that other stuff aside and realize that if you can relate to people at a very human level and enable them to be inspired and enlightened and energized about doing things that they care about, lo and behold, they'll do amazing things. And Kelly and I have been witness to that. And that's how we've gotten to where we've gotten today.
Well, and I know because of how I know you that you have been recognized now for a Media Post Award for Performance Marketing Campaign of the Year, and also the Drum Award, a Gold Award there. And by the time this airs, an Inc. 500 Best Places to Work Award, which as a technically startup agency, several years now into it, those are really high accolades of recognition for you guys to have received and to be recognized to that level. So I think the things that you're saying are being reflected by what is coming to you. I know these awards and these things were things you hadn't necessarily even pursued in the past to just throw your hat in the ring. So you probably could have been recognized even earlier than this. But I just say those things as a testament to the commitment and the way you are showing up with your own clients, the way you're running your business with ethics and having a compass that you use to guide the team that is showing up in how you're being recognized, I think, by the industry at this point.
Well, if nothing else, Kelly and I can go to bed at night feeling good about what we're doing, whether anybody else cares or recognizes it or not. At least we care and recognize what we're doing.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's also been a lesson in sort of an adaptation that we've gone into. I think Todd and I have accepted that some of the things that we naturally took for granted or just felt like par for the course and what we should have been doing, if we're not sort of standing up and shouting and garnering attention, it can get very lost in the shuffle. And that's both industry-wide with the awards and recognitions. We just never put a lot of weight into them or felt like we needed that sort of accolades to it. But unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at it, it does play a role. It's some sort of third party validation and social proof that people look for. And I think that's a lesson that we're even taking internally when it comes to clients. We're looking and saying we do a lot of work that doesn't necessarily get known or come through in the reporting or the day-to-day interactions. And without calling attention to that, without sort of puffing yourself out and pointing that out, it can be taken for granted and it can feel like, oh, things are stagnant or stale, or there's not these giant movements in a campaign, so they must just have it on autopilot. And a lot of times there's a lot of work that goes into not making changes and making the decision that, we should stick this out before doing this, or we don't want to disrupt things. But just because it's not a visible major change, it can kind of feel like it's gone out. And so just learning that need to point out and draw attention and sort of make things clear is an adaptation, at least for me, that's slowly coming about. Because for me, I just, I know we're doing the best work and I know we're doing all these great things, and that knowledge is enough for me. But yeah, I'm learning that what's in my head may not be as valuable as what other people recognize or are aware or kind of have going on in their own worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to beat your chest some, because while the client is knowing and trusting that you're doing the work, letting them know what's being done behind the curtains, that's important for their just confirmation that you are the right choice, the best choice, and the best partner that they could have, for sure. So I would be curious to know, what are some of the most rewarding parts of having built Vuja Dé Digital from the ground up, both of you?
Oh boy. I'll jump in on that one first. Things that I never thought were supposed to be the rewards of owning your own company and running your own company. I think a lot of people in the beginning think, oh, I want to own my own business and make a lot of money. And there's a certain ego to that and maybe pride. And I think maybe I had some of that stuff in my mind. I think maybe I thought about freedom and flexibility and just sort of control of your own destiny. I think what's happened is more so setting all of that aside and watching how other people sort of blossom and in an infrastructure that you have created to sort of foster that and help that along. And so I think, honestly, it sounds kind of cheesy, but the most rewarding part is just seeing an employee have a baby for their first time or buy their first house or take their dream vacation, and just know that we've created the safety for them to be able to grow and have those experiences and develop their lives. And that's honestly has been the most rewarding thing for me. It's not been about the money like I thought it might be, or it's not been about me getting to say, oh, I own my own company and we've won all these awards and done all this great stuff. I mean, that's what my ego says. But when I sit back at the end of the day, what am I most thinking about in terms of rewards? It's, hey, there's people out there, there's real humans that are paying their mortgage and having kids and building a family and taking a vacation and learning things and feeling like they're growing. When we survey the teams and have monthly meetings with them and stuff to hear what they're talking about, that's rewarding for me. It's not at all what I necessarily thought I was going to be focused on in the beginning.
Yeah, I hear you. What about you, Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's interesting. I think one of the more rewarding things for me is that when Todd, again, going back when Todd and I started this, we sort of went against the grain a little bit, and we had what could be considered a risky proposition. And it's been challenged and it's been tested throughout the years. I mean, it's not that easy to kind of come in as what's perceived as maybe a premium price point or offering, and to be able to cut corners and to be able to be transparent and to be able to do the things that felt good and felt right. And there's a lot of temptation areas where, you have a hard time and you're looking at, is there a chance to take extra margin or to take something off the table that someone doesn't know about and kind of pad the books and things, or, cut corners and things like that. And we've been able to stave a lot of that off and been able to continue to hold true to our vision and feel good about what we're offering and giving. But, it does get difficult when you feel like you're playing in what I would consider maybe not a fair arena, where you see things that are promised and said that you just simply know aren't true and aren't the way it's going. Or, you get pushed in certain things where you maybe have a great client relationship and there's turnover and then you have to scramble in. And so I don't know, what's rewarding for us is we've held really true to this vision and we've been able to survive doing so when there may have been easier paths or easier decisions to take. We've had a lot of offers for acquisition. We've had a lot of offers, barely good deals that we could have taken. It's just easier things that could have happened. And we've decided that we built this for a reason and we're going to hold through to it. And it's not always the easiest way, but I think that's very rewarding for me in that we've been able to hold true to that and stick to it and survive through it when not every company survives 5+ years and ongoing. Like, it's not the easiest thing to do.
There's a piece I'll just add to that quickly, Ray, which is I think I just put it under the umbrella of validation. We do have a pretty sort of stubborn way of thinking about doing business, but we think it's the right way, as many of the points that Kelly's made clear. I think probably the other rewarding thing is the validation of that. The awards are great and they're validating, but they're pay to play, but you still got to be judged, and it's all about judgment. And so we've been judged and by our industry peers and been validated. So that feels good. But I think more importantly, even in our own podcast, when we've interviewed clients or people, the validation that they've actually said, yeah, you guys actually do something different. You are unique. What you're doing, the service you're providing, and the way you're providing it actually is different than what most other agencies that, such and such CMO has said they've worked with or experienced. I think that's, to Kelly's point, we have, for better or worse, stuck to our sort of guns about here's what we're going to do and the way we're going to do it. We are not going to waver. We're not going to sell our service for cheaper. We're not going to cut corners. We're not going to make up stuff where we could and no one would ever know, which we've done all the forensic auditing of other things in the business and seen what's been done. And we've just said, no, we're not going to do that. And to be validated from the industry, to be validated from clients and marketers that, yeah, you guys are doing something different. I guess that might be one of the most rewarding things, right? Because we made a promise to each other and said, we're going to do it this way. And we've never wavered from that. And it's hurt us. It's for sure hurt us many times. We could be bigger in size. We could be more profitable. We've chosen to ignore that for those reasons and just do things the way we set out to do it.
I see your values being held true. I mean, as Kelly was listing off the things, which I know in my past agency life where I've seen things where it was like, make my head spin. And it wasn't something I had control over, but knowing that you're like a hard stop, like, no, we will not do that, which a lot of the things are sell in your high best people and then substitute talent that isn't really knowledgeable. I mean, that's a common thing that is done. And you've kept the high road and the accolades, like you said, you're not just in it for the money, but for doing the right thing by people, by your clients, and those karmic good things that come back when you do that will be, you've got money in the bank from a higher perspective that will take care of you into perpetuity, because what you're doing is not the norm. So I think like another question I have is like, what do you wish you would have known before starting Vuja Dé Digital? What do you wish you would have known looking back at it at this point?
Kelly, you want to run with that one first? I bet you have some interesting stuff that you wish you would have known.
Oh, I mean, I wish I would have known there was a pandemic coming and how that would have changed the world and the structure and everything out. That took some adaptation. I think we're still adapting to some of the changes and coming back around. I think for me, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I'm partnered with Todd and I don't have to handle it as much. It is very much personalities and people and, what goes into the responsibility around that and the dynamics of it. I mean, I'd been in plenty of management roles and overseen people and things like that, but it becomes a different responsibility when you see the moving parts across an entire organization and the demands and the different points of view and all of that. I mean, the people element has been very interesting. And I think the other thing that was a hard lesson for me to learn is working for a company where we're not responsible for everything. I was able to focus on just being really, really good at what I was good at and kind of letting everything else be handled by people whose expertise was there. And being responsible for everything that happens, things that are outside of your control, and knowing that you can lose a client or a revenue stream or change the dynamic for something that has nothing to do with how good or bad you are at your specific job, at your focus in your work. That was something that still continues to be hard for me, knowing that we might be affected by someone's whim or someone taking a new job and somebody coming in and having a brother that works for another agency or a friend somewhere, or just doesn't like what we do, or just doesn't like, just thinks we're more expensive than we're worth because they don't know what's gone in for years of work. And being beholden to the whims in what is ultimately a service industry it's harder when you see it from a holistic picture versus just being a director at an agency and saying, I just have to make sure I service my clients and do my job really well. And that's everything else isn't my concern. So I think really hammering home what it means to be in a service industry and at the whims of decisions and personalities of people has been something that's continues to be a challenge and something to adapt to.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as an owner. Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Todd?
I probably knew this, but I didn't want to accept it at the time. And now I've had to accept it, is how hard it is to sell the truth. It is so hard this day and age to compete for someone's attention and then compete in a probably painfully truthful way, just because Kelly and I are stubborn about what our sort of POV is about how the work that we do can be done and how most of the time it's not done the way you think it's being done. I thought more people would accept that reality. And I think what I've learned, the hardest thing is that, it's just whoever's got the shiniest bells and whistles, and whoever sells the pitch the best usually wins. And a lot of times price has to do with it. And I think that's been one of the hardest things I've learned is it's nice guys don't typically win, is what I'm learning. And that's a bummer, but I don't care. I'll still go to my grave with that as my MO. Even if I go to my grave poor, I'm going to go down that way versus just selling myself out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, with the experience that I've had, the stories that are not true and the people that pitch something that ultimately you got cheap, but it broke right away. It didn't function. It didn't work the way you thought it was. It's like a revolving door. So they're back reviewing for another agency versus when I was client side, I wished I would have had someone like you guys, because like the people that I've heard who are clients talking about you, their experience is what clients like dream of, someone who's thinking about their business, like looking at things, not just from I can buy this and spend your money and we'll hope that we hit your numbers. You're in it to win it with the client, which is not the norm. So I think when you keep beating the drum long enough, people will start to pick up. There's a difference. I mean, there's a real difference. Cheap isn't better.
Yeah, but you know what's interesting about that, Lee Ray, is the clients that have picked us have almost unanimously always said we were the outlier. We were the risk factor that they were willing to take. We've never been picked as the safe, easy choice. We've always been picked as this might be a risky choice. These guys are an outlier. They're not saying what everybody else is saying the same way. So it's interesting when you reflect with the people that do work with us or have worked with us. We were never the safe, easy pick. We were the risky, oh my God, if this backfires, I'm going to lose my job pick. And fortunately, that's never happened. And it's been the opposite of that. We've always been the risk factor.
Right. Well, people rave about you. So when they're connected and have an agreement and are counting on you to come through, you guys come through. I don't know, Kelly, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think one of the things in going back to the principles and values is we haven't kept every single client. Every engagement hasn't always worked. And something that Todd and I talk about all the time and is really important to me is we take good, hard looks when we run a campaign that doesn't work, or that we do lose a client for whatever reason, if it's a whim or things that we feel like are fair or unfair. And I think for us, for me, it's really important that I feel incredibly confident that we did everything the right way for the right reasons. We left no stone unturned, that if things weren't working, we lost sleep about it. We put time into it. We met, we got creative, we went through it, we made recommendations. Not everything's going to work, especially with a lot of the types of clients that we work with that are startup or figuring out the market or not at their full maturity curve. Media is rarely going to solve every problem. So if other parts of things aren't working, media can't always be the solution to that. But I think I've felt really good about genuinely, and Todd argues with me sometimes on that, every time someone has decided to try something else or thought the grass was greener somewhere else, I've not run into a situation where I felt like I could get myself to believe that was true or possible. Like, I could be wrong. It absolutely could be, but I feel like we've done everything that could be done. We have the talented people. We've looked at it. We've made the recommendations. And that at best, I feel like the people that are trying other things are going to be scrambling to try and get back at the very least at the relationship and the service level that they got with us. And that's something that I have to believe deeply in, because if I ever felt like we lost a client and someone else could come in and solve something that we didn't, that would be a really big problem for me to accept it and swallow.
Yeah, I think it would be tough. I think it would be tough, honestly, from just everything I've seen. So for aspiring entrepreneurs, people who are wanting to break free from, maybe they're in an agency or they've got the marketing background, but they're wanting to do their own thing, what advice would you have for them in stepping out into their own entrepreneurial endeavor?
Ooh, I have a great answer for this. This is going to sound funny too. Don't be Kelly. Because here's the contrast between Kelly and I and thinking about somebody starting their own agency. You could be great at strategy and ideas and creative like Kelly is, which he is a genius at, but he never would want to or claim to do, or would maybe even be, I could be so bold to say he could be successful at doing all the parts of the business that I do. And what I've seen today is the world of technology and remote work and stuff has created tons of entrepreneurs, right? There's people now with social media, influencers. What is entrepreneurialism anymore? It's not necessarily what it used to be, where you go get an MBA and you go start a company or whatever. So I think anybody thinking about starting a company, if you're great at the ideation and the creativity and the strategy and those things, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be great at finance and HR and operations and management of people. Better check that part of yourself at the door, because that is a really, really hard part of business. And you're not going to be able to hire people to do all that stuff for you in the beginning, which means you have to be a manager and you have to be a people manager and an HR person and a finance person. Those are all hard things to do. And sometimes what Kelly does can be the easiest part. And sometimes what I do can be the hardest part. And sometimes what I do can be really easy. And Kelly's idea is going to make or break a startup brand. That could be the hardest thing. But you have to have all of that stuff. And so for one person to maybe feel like they can check all of those boxes to start a company, I think is really ambitious. I've learned that finding great people and surrounding yourself with great people that you have sort of different but complementary skill sets is a great entrepreneurial way to start a company. I think it'd be really hard. I've thought about it. What could I do? Could I get Vuja Dé up to where it is today by myself? There's no way. There's no way, because I'm missing half of the equation. And that's the part that Kelly fills. And he might say the same thing about me, that he would never do what I'm doing. He hates what I do. But you got to be able to do it all, or you're not going to get a company full of employees that are happy and working and excited and passionate and curious about doing all the things, unless you can check a lot of boxes. So I would say to any entrepreneur thinking about starting their own business, it is hard. And it's more than just being creative or more than just having a good idea. Once you start hiring people, you now are responsible for their livelihood. And that is a whole different skill set and ballgame.
What would you say, Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with Todd on you have to be prepared to spend a lot of time and energy on the things you don't love or aren't necessarily your expertise or where you want them to be. And obviously, the more you can offload that to a partner or employees or other people in delegation, you're better off. For me, I think it's the preparation for lack of certainty and lack of control. Again, I've often had this struggle where I've looked at it and been like, if I just went and did what I did, and I could probably hold a really nice high title at a big agency that brought in all kinds of big relationships, and my life would probably be a lot easier, probably be better compensated for it too, to be honest, if I'm totally being honest with it, because again, you're just able to focus on what you do. Now, yes, you're at the whim of, you don't have the control, and you're at the whim of, you lose that client, maybe you get laid off, but there's plenty of other agencies that need the roles and things like that. So that it doesn't not come with certainty, but just again, that beholden to people's whims and their desires and, the industry and economic factors and things like that. you're at the whim of things out of your control at such a greater degree. You have to worry about things like recessions and budget pullbacks and AI coming in and changing things up. And there's all kinds of things that at all times are just throwing reactivity things. You have to react and be prepared and address. And how is this going to affect me? And it means you can't just focus on, I'm really good at this and I'm going to be really good at this and nothing else matters. There's so many other things matter and so many other risk factors and things. I can't tell you how many nights I've spent, and Todd will commiserate with this, doing the math in my head. What's our runway? How much do we have? What are we coming in? Are we growing? Are we going? Just the math and the numbers and the uncertainty and the what ifs, you can't keep them out because you're responsible for it all. It's not just, is my client happy and my campaign's going great? It's, are my employees happy? Are they getting poached? What's the economics doing? Is someone going to leave? Is our main point of contact to the client going to take a different job? Is the next person coming in going to like us? Are they even going to give us a chance? Like, it's just that uncertainty and that lack of control it's what every entrepreneur says, but it's very hard to get used to riding those waves and going with that tide and just being at the whims of what's happening and being able to navigate that.
Yeah, you better have really, really, really high mental fortitude and mental stamina to survive the psychological torment of owning and running your own company, as Kelly said. And you better have thick skin, and your ego might get bruised here or there. So you got to be able to endure those kinds of things. It is definitely not easy if you want to turn it into a big business, a multi-million-dollar business with employees. There's a lot you have to do.
And all those concerns evolve. They evolve consistently, right? It's the funny term, the more money, more problems, right? It is. Even when you do reach milestones, even when you do grow, it just comes with the next set of concerns, more people, more growth, more concerns, more challenges, more risks, more what happens if someone leaves. Like, there really is you've reached a threshold of it if it's not a worry anymore, right? It's different problems and they just grow and they evolve.
Let's end on a high note of what the best thing you like about kind of driving your own ship and being your own commander in chiefs, running your own agency.
I'll start and let you finish, Todd, so you can close it out because I think you're going to have the best answer to this. For me, it's the same things that kind of create the problems are the upside, right? Being in control of our own destiny, being able to make decisions for the right reasons, being able to feel good that we're not sort of following someone else's vision and that we're bringing something to life and that we can feel good about that. Reaching those milestones comes with rewards. Todd and I have talked about different milestones. When we surpassed the size of the agency we first started working together, like that felt really good. When we won certain awards, like that felt really good. There's validation to it. It's the outcomes of the effort and seeing it kind of pay off. And I've kind of joked or said certain things about the bad side of client relationships, but there's really good sides of those client relationships, right? When we get the testimonials, when we get the feedback on client surveys, when we get the recognition of the effort and the work that we put in, and when we get the performance milestones, when we hit our clients' goals, when we exceed our clients' goals, when we watch clients we work with get promoted and accolades on behalf of the work we did, like all of that's very rewarding and it comes to great fruition. And again, being in an ownership role is different than being in an employee role. With the pressure and the heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? With the pressure of the downside comes the rewards of the upside. That's something I didn't recognize when I was just an employee. Especially when you're younger, you're like, oh, well, why does the owner take so much money, or why do they make all this up and all this? And you don't realize how much risk and pressure and reward and all of those things go with. Now, obviously, I don't agree with the extreme imbalances, which don't exist in our company in case anyone's worried that it does. But as you go up, there's more to that being in a leadership role that you take for granted that you don't necessarily see down there. You're like, oh, they don't really do anything day to day. They don't really have much in there, but there's so much more to it that you just don't know until you're there.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. What about you, Todd?
I think it's pride in the workmanship that you set a vision for and are able to achieve. And there's no one above you anymore to stand in the way of that or make those decisions or choices for you. And success or failure are 100% your responsibility. That is I think maybe at different stages of everybody's life, you get to a point where that is the thing you crave. For me, it took till I was in my 40s of working through corporate America for Kelly to push me off that cliff and accept that risk was worth the reward. And the reward is the pride in what we can look at what we've built and our workmanship, and that the ethics and the morals that we set out to sort of not waver from have served us to this point. There's a lot of upside and just reward to that. I feel good every day about that. People remind me I should feel good about that every day, but I'm incessantly always worried and pessimistic that the sky is falling, but that's my job. But the reward is definitely taking those risks that Kelly talked about and seeing them pan out and pay off, not just for us, but as I've said before, to see an employee buy their first home or have a child or build a family, or like I said, all those things. At the end of the day, I'm pretty proud of that. I'm pretty darn proud that I can look back and say the entity that Kelly and I have forged is strong and safe and secure, and it's providing those things. And I get to go to bed every day going, yeah, I did that.
Mm-hmm. Which is awesome. So on that note, that's a perfect way to wrap this up. And I will put the link to the agency in the show notes, because anyone who's thinking about looking outside what they're currently doing, or maybe wanting an assessment done of what's currently being done, I can't recommend Vuja Dé Digital more. And I've worked with a lot of agencies over my career, client side and agency side, from New York to global roles. So highly, highly recommend these guys and the team that they've built and are continuing to grow out. And the accolades, you deserve them and more. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lorraine. Much gratitude to you as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Until next time. And that's a wrap on another episode of And Then I Did This, celebrating the lives of those who've walked away from the beaten path to pursue work and a life that nourishes their soul. If you're feeling inspired and ready to explore your own path to freedom, check out youcanbefree.life, where you'll find resources and support to help you break free and live life on your own terms. See you next time.